The 1975 Massey Lectures, Limits to Science. Ideas, with the second of the 1975 Massey Lectures. Tonight, Science and Technological Change. The series is given by Dr. J. Tuzo Wilson, Director General of the Ontario Science Centre. Following tonight's lecture, we'll hear a panel discussion on the subject Limits to Science with Charles Taylor, Fred Nelman, and Roger Gaudry. J. Tuzo Wilson has been a chief exponent of the theory of continental drift, a subject of vigorous scientific controversy. 2 decades ago, the theory was almost universally rejected by geophysicists. It is now almost universally accepted and is the most important explanation we have about the history of the Earth's surface. Dr. Wilson has written more than 100 scientific papers and 5 books. He has lectured at more than 180 universities on 6 continents. He is a Fellow of the Royal Society of London, a Foreign Associate of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, past President of the Royal Society of Canada, Vice President of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, and is a Companion of the Order of Canada. The 1975 Massey Lectures, Limits to Science. Tonight's subject is Science and Technological Change. Dr. J. Tuzo Wilson.
Active scientists do not give much thought to the history and philosophy of science. If questioned, many would answer that success comes to the diligent who follow the precepts of their teachers, collect data, interpret them logically, and publish their results as quickly as possible. This is indeed the behavior of many. Such scientists are like high priests, devoted to a scientific religion which they revere. This is the austere view which many of the public have of scientists, and which many of the scientists have of themselves. I recall being upbraided by my classmate, Harry Welsh, the former head of the Department of Physics at Toronto, for my frivolous attitudes and for not taking science sufficiently seriously. Why, he asked, did I rush around the world and worry about social concerns? Why ever did I publish textbooks? Granted they were necessary, but writing them was suitable as an occupation for retirement. The active scientist should devote his life to pure research, to pursuing physics as he had been taught it. Many Nobel Prizes have been won by that approach, including that of Harry's mentor, the great Canadian scientist Gerhard Hertzberg. He has devoted his life to hard work in his chosen field of spectroscopy and become the world leader in it. He has made many discoveries by pursuing assiduously the same logical path. That is what most scientists do, but few of them do it as well as Hertzberg. According to this view, science, like a religion, involves both faith and practice. It is faith that nature is arranged in an orderly and logical manner according to laws which can be interpreted, and it is the practice of examining nature by orderly and logical methods to discover those laws. There is, however, another way by which science advances, which is illogical and depends upon departing from the rules previously thought to be true. Thomas Kuhn, in 1967, seems to be the first clearly to recognize and describe these scientific revolutions. In each branch of science, logical step-by-step progress along traditional lines has eventually reached an impasse. Contradictions and difficulties have piled up, until by a stroke of insight, some genius or a quick succession of perceptive people have seen that by taking a completely different direction, a new and better path forward is opened ahead. Such turning points are like the foundings of new religions in science, and are as hard for the faithful to accept. Kuhn called them scientific revolutions. He identified 5, and such is the rapidity of recent change that most would add a few others which have occurred since. The essence of a scientific revolution is that it is more than the development of scientific ideas along accepted lines. A revolution differs because it involves changing the framework in which ideas about a subject are regarded. The first and greatest scientific revolution was that associated with the name of Copernicus, although some others also deserve credit for its recognition. Before Copernicus, men believed that the Earth is the center of the universe and that all celestial bodies revolve around it. To anyone looking at the night sky, it seems quite natural that they should have thought that way. The planets don't look like the Earth, or the stars like the sun. It was due to Copernicus, more than anyone else, that men came to accept the idea, so astonishing at first, that the sun is larger and more important than the Earth, and that the sun is the center of the solar system. This idea vastly reduced the importance of the Earth and of man, and made it possible to begin to understand the nature of the stars. Each revolution has resulted in a change from a simple and direct view of nature by practical men to a more sophisticated and more subtle interpretation. The simple view of the diversity of nature is that every species has been created separately. It was Darwin's contribution to suggest that all creatures are related. We humans are descended from primitive mammals, and we are cousins to all creation. Why should a miner or a quarryman, seeing different fossils in different layers of rock, not think that each successive assemblage was due to a separate creation and a separate destruction? Is it not most remarkable to believe that all life, including our own, is in direct, mother-to-child, parental descent from tiny single-celled creatures invisible except under a microscope? Other scientific revolutions resulted in the development of modern chemistry and modern physics. Another led to the understanding of DNA, the molecular double helix of life, and another to some grasp of that strange company of pulsars, quasars, and black holes which fascinate astronomers and public alike. The acceptance of continental drift is yet another. It is upon such great mental leaps that modern science is based as much as upon the prosaic little steps of normal science. As well as revolutions in science, there have been others, revolutions in philosophy and revolutions in technology. It seems to me that Copernicus could not have made his deductions unless he had been trained in the belief in law and order, in the principle of cause and effect. If he had been an animist who believed in magic, in the potency of every rock and plant and creature, he could not have conceived of the order and magnificence of the solar system. If he had been brought up as a Zoroastrian or as a Chinese who believed in a constant struggle between the powers of good and evil, then he would not have developed his concept of an orderly universe. Western Christendom has shared with the Jews and the Arabs the belief in one God, in a single power in the universe. It has inherited the Greek philosophy of an orderly arrangement of nature and its gods, which culminated in Ptolemy's golden chain, upon which every angel, every cherubim and seraphim hung in ordered sequence, and it grew up under the rule of law imposed by the Romans. Copernicus' discovery was only possible because he was a believer in a logical philosophy and in one God, a single power controlling the universe. Copernicus was a Christian monk, trained in an old tradition of unity, who believed in an ordered universe, and it was this background which enabled him to discern the true order and arrangement of the solar system. But if, in the realm of ideas, the great changes that have shaped our lives, in this the most stimulating and most exciting age that ever existed, have been scientific and philosophical, it is also true that more than the soaring power of the human mind was needed to produce the thrill and luxury of our lives. Technological advances made with human hands were also needed to produce our present state. Revolutions in technology are not changes in ideas alone, but involve changes in artifacts and in practices and in techniques. They are of many kinds, including the discovery and use of fire, of tools and of weapons, of agriculture, food, medicine, transportation, communication, and engineering. The first great technological change, and the one which developed man himself by enlarging his brain, was the development of tools, first in clubs, spears, knives, bows and arrows, and later today's vast arsenals of weapons and machine shops of tools. With tools we'll include the use of fire. In food, man's greatest change has been from living as a nomad, dependent upon hunting and gathering, to the fixed life of a farmer, dependent upon agriculture and supporting settlements and civilizations. This is developed into today's agribusiness, by which a few % of North Americans feed the rest in abundance and produce a surplus for export. In medicine, if the elucidation of the DNA chain was a scientific revolution, surely inoculation, aseptic surgery, and anesthesia, with their immense effects in reducing mortality, were technological revolutions. In transport, the harnessing of beasts of burden, the invention of the wheel and the cart, the steam train, automobile, airplane, and rocket were all practical developments, slowly made first by practical men, not due to brilliant flashes of scientific insight. In communications, the slow development of speech as man's brain evolved, the invention of writing, of movable type, of the power press, telegraph, and telephone were all technological, even if radio, films, and television owe much to science. The lists which others might prepare would differ in detail, but no doubt all of us would include many of the same landmarks. What tremendous technological achievements! What triumphs of ingenuity, now so magnificent to contemplate, so possible to comprehend, so practical to use, but once how difficult to drag, over millennia, out of men's reluctant minds. Among this galaxy of achievements in science, in philosophy, and in technology, some stand out, which I propose to label as transcendental concepts. And I wish to consider two sorts of transcendental concepts. First, those which have affected the population of mankind and man's material well-being. And secondly, those which have influenced how man has thought and how he ought to think about his place in the universe. I should like to suggest that there have been 3 transcendental concepts in each category, 6 in all. From the point of view of material well-being, the earliest technological revolution was, as I have said, the development of tools and weapons. A slow revolution, because, according to anthropologists, man's use of tools could only develop as fast as his brain increased in capacity. The extent of this change is astonishing. This autumn, in Professor Jacobs' laboratory in Java, I held the fossil skull of a million-year-old man in my hands. This early Java man must have been nearly as large as ourselves, but his brows receded and his brain seemed tiny. He was obviously a pinhead. The effect of tools was to develop the human race from tribes of subhumans evolving in Java and Africa, and unable to survive far from the tropics or move far over water, into many races distributed all over the world. Tools enabled man to diversify, to change from naked dwellers in the hot valleys of Africa and Asia, and to spread all over the globe, to become even Eskimo hunters in the Arctic. This led to a corresponding increase in numbers. From a few thousands or tens of thousands of subhumans, man's numbers grew to hundreds of thousands and perhaps to millions. That growth could not continue indefinitely, for each territory could only support a certain quota of hunters, and any excess of humans, like other animals, starved to death. The world population of hunters was soon a stable one, limited, like the Eskimos, by their food supply. The second great human achievement of a technological nature was the development of agriculture somewhere in the river valleys of the Middle East. Perhaps 10,000 years ago, when warmth caused melting of the last ice age and produced flooded rivers. Perhaps in Egypt, perhaps in Turkey or Mesopotamia, or perhaps in Pakistan, this miracle of food production developed and spread. Annual crops greatly increased the abundance of food and enabled men to settle down in villages and cities, to build homes and to accumulate more goods than they could carry as nomadic hunters. Because men could accumulate possessions beyond a day's need, he had to learn how to count and to write. Large settlements led to a hierarchy of classes, of rulers and ruled, of masters and slaves. Again, there was an enormous increase in population. Empires of tens of millions of people developed in all the fertile places of the world. But once again, populations had to become steady, although at a higher level. Other technological revolutions occurred during the last 100 years. Among them were the renaissance of learning, the development of seagoing vessels, the invention of movable type. This last valuable because it enabled men to read what others had done and to start from where they had left off, instead of always having to begin afresh. As important as these were, they did not create our modern world. For throughout the whole history of civilization until the Industrial Revolution, no one could do more work than he, his family, his slaves, and his beasts could do, helped by wind and falling water. Man used fire to heat, to cook, and to smelt, but not until recently to do any work. Hence I consider that these earlier discoveries were but minor stimuli compared with the discovery of synthetic power, which James Watt first achieved with his steam engine almost exactly 200 years ago. This was the third transcendental technological revolution. For the first time, man had unlimited power at his disposal, and this enabled all the other inventions to flourish and to be spread by mass production. Sailing ships had limited capacity. They could carry people, they could carry treasures, silk and tea, but only steam and motor ships could carry large quantities of food across the oceans and support large-scale international commerce. Not until the power press had replaced the hand press did an abundance of books and universal literacy become possible. The pills we take, the food we eat, the television we watch, the cars we drive, the clothes we wear are all possible because of cheap energy and abundant power. North Americans use 10 horsepower per head today, the equivalent of 30 untiring slaves for each of us. Thus I suggest that the kind of life we enjoy today is based upon three great discoveries which were technological and not scientific, not philosophical and not religious. The first two, tools and agriculture, developed slowly, long before science was invented. Watt and the others who developed the third revolution in the steam engine did not owe much to science either. Nor did Faraday, who invented the electric motor, nor Diesel, who developed the internal combustion engine, nor Parsons and Whittle, who perfected the turbine engine. They were all practical men. Scientists did not discover technology or invent those things upon which our present material civilization rests. Scientists came along afterwards and put on the trimmings. Science, like democracy, has only flourished in rich countries which can afford it. One cannot do chemistry in a jungle. This is one limit to science. For science to survive, it must stave off a return to barbarism. If technology, rather than science, has dominated the practical things of life, has science dominated the field of ideas? What is the place of philosophy and religion? Here I think we must split the credit, for I believe one can again see three transcendental ideas, of which the first was religious or philosophical, and the second and third were scientific. Again, I should like to emphasize that science is an orderly and logical way of looking at nature, and I do not believe it could have evolved in any society except one which already believed in law and order. Thus, the establishment of the religion and philosophy of Western Christendom was the first step in achieving science. How could one begin to look at nature in a logical way when superstition demanded that every bush held a demon? It was the concept of a universe under a single control, which the Hebrew prophets, the Greek philosophers, Christ and Muhammad developed, and which we inherit, that made possible Copernicus's great revolution in thought. It was the transcendental revolution of realizing that a single power controlled the universe which paved the way for science. Thus, the first transcendental revolution in the field of ideas was religious or philosophical. It was necessary to pave the way for the second and third great revolutions in thought, which were those made by Copernicus and Darwin. The mystery of why the other great agricultural civilizations, such as the Egyptians, Chinese, Iranians, or Incas, never developed science, may well be because they never realized that the universe is a unit, governed by a single set of laws. Because they believed in contending forces, they never looked for the laws of science. Some, like the Greeks, discovered elements of science, but no other civilization besides our own has so consistently pursued the scientific method. Once Copernicus had suggested that the Earth was one planet among many, and when it became evident that the Sun was one star among many, the idea that the Earth had been specially created for a special creature, ourselves, became logically untenable. When Darwin propounded the theory of evolution, what rational basis remained for believing that man is more important than a fly, more precious, or more likely to achieve a resurrection? Each triumvirate forms a dependent sequence. There could have been no Darwin without Copernicus, nor Copernicus without his predecessors. So far as I can see, they are all equally correct, but unfortunately they are not all equally believed. Whereas the Western world accepts the idea of one God and the idea of the sun as the center of the universe, we still have difficulty in accepting Darwin's teaching that all creatures are equal. In this we are quite illogical. To kill another human being is murder. To injure a pet is inhuman. To kill a chicken or a steer for food is inconsequential. Only the Jains in India respect the life of insects. So much for our belief in Darwin. We all hold immensely exaggerated ideas about our own importance. It is part of our mechanism for self-preservation. The other triumvirate is also sequential. Agriculture was not possible without tools, nor synthetic energy without both. The use of tools was a great departure from nature, agriculture a greater one. But our dependence upon synthetic energy seems to be the most tremendous departure from natural laws and the most dangerous. It was this last discovery, only 200 years ago, which transformed the world of the past and made possible great scientific advances and generated the explosion of population which we now face. The present danger is that, unlike the discovery of simple tools in agriculture, of which the supply is constantly renewed, the fossil fuels, especially petroleum, are being rapidly used up and are not being replenished. The third technological revolution is failing, and one of three things must therefore happen. Man must find an alternative, long-lasting source of energy, or he must utterly change his habits, or failing this, he will suffer disaster. We do not have much time to make this search and choose our course. Consider the dates of the 6 transcendental revolutions. The first 3 developed slowly over long periods of time, but if we select median dates, we can perhaps give an approximate time for each revolution. First, the development of tools happened of the order of 1 million years ago. Secondly, the development of agriculture, 10,000 years ago. Thirdly, the concept of a single God, an ordered universe, and the rule of law was born about 2,000 years ago. Fourthly, Copernicus's realization that the Earth is not the center of the universe, 500 years ago. Fifthly, Watt's invention of the steam engine occurred only 200 years ago. And sixthly, Darwin's disposal of any special place for humans a century ago. To give a better grasp of the significance of these dates, compare them with money and equate 1 year to 1 cent. The 6 revolutions then occurred at times equivalent to $10,000, to $100, and to $20, to $5, to $2, and to $1. If one thinks of the difference between a $10,000 bill and a $1 or $2 bill, this will illustrate the accelerating rate of change. This rapidity of change is frightening because human nature, which developed by evolution over millions of years, is slow and difficult to change. Women's nature is to maintain the human race by having many children, while man's nature is to protect his family by collecting as many possessions as he can. By education much has been achieved, but by no means enough to cause men everywhere to moderate their appetites and limit their populations. Perhaps some women don't want to have a lot of children, but it is a sad provision of nature that all female creatures produce more offspring than are required to perpetuate a static population. Until recently, this applied to all humans, and it still applies to most. The resulting increase in population must at some stage lead to disaster, because, as the astronauts' pictures have so forcibly brought home to us, the Earth is finite, and there is no other place to go. The essence of this series of lectures is to suggest that 3 transcendental concepts in philosophy and science have revealed to us the laws of nature which should apply to man, and that 3 transcendental discoveries in technology have given us a temporary dispensation from these laws, so that we have achieved immense numbers and wealth far beyond anything known to any other creature. The human tragedy is that the philosophical and scientific ideas appear to be correct, but in our pride we ignore them, while the technological achievements appear destined to fail, but in our conceit we have placed our confidence in them. Can we change?
Science and Technological Change, the second of the 1975 CBC Massey Lectures, given by Dr. J. Tuzo Wilson. In a moment, we'll go to Montreal, where a panel will discuss the subject Limits to Science. Dr. Wilson's topic for these Massey lectures.